neglected to mention before that the coffee break was sponsored by the United Kingdom. So thank you to the United Kingdom. I will seek now to summarize the discussions of the morning, following clarifications provided by the Secretariat, the analysis of the papers, proposals, and discussions. Please bear in mind that based on the discussions, the Secretariat has heard all the comments, and all those comments will be noted and considered in the report and going forward to the Assembly. The purpose of the summary is to just see whether we have captured the essence of what has been discussed this morning. The committee discussed and agreed with the proposed multi-layer structure of the Global Air Navigation Plan. The committee also agreed to move the Global Air Navigation Plan to a web-based platform, the Global Air Navigation Plan portal. The committee emphasized that the web-based platform should have the capability to print an executive summary that is easily understood by non-technical personnel. The committee recognized that the global strategic level of the Global Air Navigation Plan is crucial to drive the evolution of the global air navigation system and should therefore provide strategic guidelines. The committee agreed in principle with the vision, performance ambitions, and conceptual roadmap presented. The committee noted that space vehicles are not aircraft. The committee agreed that the conceptual roadmap should be the umbrella for the rest of technical concepts within the Global Air Navigation Plan, and that the relationship between the global strategic level and the global technical level should be better reflected within the Global Air Navigation Plan. The committee agreed with the incorporation of the civil-military dimension and emerging air navigation concepts, such as big data, in the Global Air Navigation Plan. The committee was informed that human considerations in the Global Air Navigation Plan are already part of the ongoing Secretariat work. The committee discussed the proposed Aviation System Block Upgrade Framework update and change management process, and agreed to implement this process as soon as possible in order to improve transparency and stability. Also, the committee reviewed the rationale for the development of the basic building blocks framework and agreed to consider its initial version. The committee agreed that the relationship between the aviation system block upgrade, the basic building blocks, and their impact in the regional plans should be clear within the Global Air Navigation Plan. The committee discussed a series of proposals to maximize the potential of the Global Air Navigation portal and agreed that ICAO should enable within the Global Air Navigation Plan portal the capability to share results of research, development and validation on operational and technological matters, as well as information on aviation system block upgrades deployment and lessons learned at regional, state, and industry levels. The committee highlighted the importance of strengthening the relationship between the Global Air Navigation Plan, the Global Aviation Safety Plan, and the Global Aviation Security Plan. The committee noted the discussion on the development of data policy, which is not part of this committee's work, but will be forwarded to the legal committee. Finally, I would like to encourage the members present to attend the Sky Talks related to the Global Air Navigation Plan, taking place on Friday morning at 8:30 a.m., and on the Global Air Navigation Plan and the Global Aviation Safety Plan relationship, taking place on Thursday at 1 p.m. I would now like to invite any remarks on this summary.
Thank you, Chair. Just one addition. I think that was a very good summary. Some mention of a study group or a means of progressing from here to present a draft GANP for consideration by states the Council and at the Assembly next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Australian. Noted. If there are no other discussions on the summary, I'd like to move to sub-agenda item 1.3. And we should see the items to be discussed on the screen. Before we move into discussion, as previously, I would like to remind you of the recommendations from the Secretariat Working Papers. And this is Working Paper 26. Regarding air navigation roadmaps, that the conference request ICAO to provide air navigation roadmaps in the Global Air Navigation Plan, which support, 1, new airspace users and emerging technologies, 2, greater flexibility in the choice of technologies for airspace users, 3, early adoption of new technologies and operational capabilities as they emerge. B, urge states and international organizations to provide ICAO with timely information on states' modernization plans and the equipage plans of airspace users. And C, urge states and international organizations to work collaboratively with ICAO to adopt a performance-based approach for developing performance requirements and acceptable means of compliance to support the implementation of the Global Air Navigation Plan. May I now ask Japan to present Working Paper 103.
Thank you, Chairperson. So this paper presents a leading edge of IP aviation for safety communication service as a fundamental solution in the fragmented datacom infrastructure. In this paper also explains about the situation over the last 2 decades with some challenges and forthcoming broadband service. As all members know, datacom applications and infrastructure will be an essential part of an enabler for realization of trajectory-based operation, TBO. However, the ATM community has recognized the limitation of current communication protocols using ACAS and ATN-OSI, which are incompatible with Internet Protocol Suite's IPS. This existing datacom infrastructure remains primitive network. Besides, relating old-fashioned ATM applications such typified as fans, pre-fans, and ATNS OSI, which are provided by aviation custom protocols, are low compatibilities for IPS. Since the current fragmented situation came from diversity datacom standards and technical specifications, it applies no closer than seamless and interoperable network. Therefore, this context would be a critical defect as to realization of TBO. It is also obviously a great challenge for effective implementation of GANP, GASP, and GATMOC under No Country Left Behind initiative. With lessons learned from the complex de facto standards and lack of harmonization in the last 2 decades, the US and EU had got started to global technological harmonization activity and development of datacom over IPS implementation roadmap. Furthermore, standardization cooperation between ICAO and Standard Development Organization SDOs would be bringing a standardization roadmap for realization of TBO infrastructure. Japan is also now joining there, and we are enthusiastic over the possibilities of seamless and interoperable IPS infrastructure. However, to strengthen and ensure this interoperability for datacom, an appropriate regulatory framework for recommended fundamental capability with software list should be seriously considered in ICAO and SDO's standardization activity. As a conclusion, in order to recapture the global, seamless, and interoperable datacom infrastructure, ICAO, SDO, states, ANSPs, and ATM industries should be strengthened collaboration to keep up with advanced ICT infrastructure in ATM committee. So in this time, the conference invite to the point is our urge ICAO and SDOs to actively contribute to the development datacom IPS standardization roadmap, and also urge to develop an appropriate regulatory framework for datacom IPS onboard equipment software list. And besides, agree to that ICAO and SDOs conduct a datacom's IPS seminar and symposium. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Japan. Working paper 103 was the only working paper presented by a state. So I will now move to working papers from the international organizations. I ask that working paper be presented from ARINC, Eurocare, RTCA, and SAE.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm presenting working paper 55 on behalf of 4 standard developing organizations: ARINC, Eurocare, RTCA, and SAE International. We're looking back to a long and successful history in using industry standards to complement ICAO provisions by making direct reference to industry standards in ICAO annexes as an acceptable means of compliance, or to define the technical specifications as such. Industry standards, which are often best industry practices, are also in support to complement ICAO docs by referencing or partially replicating each other's products. Standards give the regulator more flexibility in providing the how to comply with a higher level and stable regulatory frame. The 4 standards developing organizations I'm representing today are mostly referenced by ICAO provisions, are all ICAO recognized international organizations. We have just recently updated our cooperation agreements with ICAO to take into account the last ANC recommendations endorsed by the General Assembly. This includes our commitment to make available to all ICAO member states the standards referenced by ICAO provisions for free. Standards developing organizations like the 4 are open to international participation. The standard developing process is consensus-driven or consensus-based, open and transparent, and includes verification and validation steps along the way to the approval. Where possible, standards developing organizations join forces and develop technically harmonized documents, which increases even more the global participation and global relevance of the resulting standards in this respect. Through a close link to all major modernization programs, the SDOs support the uptake of new technologies and their implementation. Therefore, industry standards are globally well recognized and applied worldwide by the aviation community. The 4 SDOs I'm representing are working already today closely with ICAO and are part of the Standards Roundtable to identify more areas where industry standards can support ICAO provisions. The way of a secondary layer of documentation, which is more flexible, at the forefront of innovation, can be adapted to a changing environment, often triggered by disruptive and emerging technologies. In addition, the separation between the high-level essential requirements and the technical standards accelerates the development of both levels and provisions, avoids redundancy and duplications of efforts, and allocates the community's limited resources effectively and most efficiently. We offer ICAO our support to make more and better use of standards to benefit from a broad representation of experts, by which its own expertise will be increased and the quality of the overall system of ICAO provisions and supporting material will be improved, and not to forget that standards are essential tools for implementation and at the same time ensuring global harmonization when rolling out programs. ICAO and SDOs should coordinate the application of a verification and validation process in order to guarantee the quality of deliverables and to ensure that they are fit for the purpose to be referenced by ICAO provisions. This will further enhance and guarantee global harmonization and worldwide interoperability. The conference is invited to agree on the recommendation as listed in paragraph 3.2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. In order for the working paper 55 to be discussed, we need a seconder from states. Can you just indicate by pressing your microphone buttons? Yeah, thank you. I have enough support for the paper to be discussed. We now move to working paper 172. Council, please present working paper 172.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to you all. Ever-increasing automation in air traffic management poses new challenges for global standardization and harmonization. To exploit the advantages of automation and facilitate CANSO's vision of a globally harmonized, interoperable, and efficient air navigation system, CANSO strongly encourages closer coordination between standards organization and mutual recognition of conformity assessment results. We applaud the work that standards-making organizations like ARINC, EUROCAE, RTCA, and SAE International are undertaking to provide the mechanism for development and publication of standards, including transparent, consensus-based, and proven processes, which are open to all stakeholders and to the worldwide participation. And we fully support their working paper 55 that was just presented here. To allow global harmonization of these standards, it is essential that ICAO strengthens its provisions for developing detailed technical specifications, standards, and conformity assessment procedures to facilitate an interoperable data environment. It is of the utmost importance for the consistency of the global transportation system to achieve interoperability between the different technical solutions that are being developed. Having said that, we would like to remove the provisions in our paper on paragraph 2.7 regarding the World Trade Organization Code of Practice, as we understand from talks with ARINC, EUROCAE, RTCA, and SAA, that the example giving is not a good example. For this reason, we asked the conference to note the paper, B, agree that standard-making organizations whose material are submitted for considerations by ICAO shall comply with the proposed standardization provisions set out in this paper, and we adjust that to section 2.2 until 2.6 because we delete 2.7. Task ICAO with establishing a task force, including representation by regulatory agencies for the purpose of defining additional requirements for the verification and validation process applied by ICAO, as per ICAO Assembly Resolution A39/22, to recognize the work of other standard-making organizations in the development of ICAO material in accordance with the criteria set out in paragraph B. And we encourage states and stakeholders to actively contribute to the development of detailed technical specifications. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council. So may I again ask for states to second this paper for discussion? Thank you. There is support for the discussion on this paper. Please note that on this agenda item 1.3, there's also an information paper 260 by the United Arab Emirates. Before opening for discussion, does the Secretariat has any clarification? Okay, thank you. There's no clarification from the Secretariat. So again, using your microphone buttons, please indicate whether you wish to discuss this paper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to all. No discussion really, but Denmark would like to make support to working paper number 55 and its recommendations. We underline the need for industry standards to be referenced and compliant to the performance-based approach and framework, especially when deemed ready for industrialization and implementation. It's important, though, to underline the necessity of a full and a transparent verification and validation process, ensuring support for global interoperability and harmonization. We would like to remind that Assembly Resolution A39/22, which was mentioned earlier this morning, on the formulation of standard instructs the Council, and I quote, to utilize material developed by other standard-making organizations subject to adequacy of a verification and validation process. We would like to see this process progressing forward towards full robustness, to which the standardization roundtable could play a recent agreement between ICAO and the industry standards development organizations, making it possible to provide industry standards to ICAO and its member states free of charge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Denmark. Singapore. Thank you, Singapore. Norway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Norway support working paper 26 as presented by the Secretariat and the new approach to the development of roadmaps provided in the GANP. Nevertheless, we would like to underline the need for a performance-based approach and to avoid silos effect. We therefore propose a change to the recommendation A2. I read it now, greater flexibility where possible in the choice of technologies. So we propose to add where possible and to erase for airspace users. Further, we support working paper 103 as presented by Japan and its recommendations, which support the approach of the European states and US in ensuring global interoperability. We would, in this context, to mention information paper 273, where the collaboration Japan is referring to is described as for its status. It is also worth noting that Europe encouraged in working paper 35 that ICAO could rely more and facilitate these states and regional modernization programs, collaboration, and encourage enhanced coordination between them. Finally, regarding Working Paper 172 presented by Council and the clarifications given, Norway fully support the working paper. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Norway. IATA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. IATA supports Working Paper 103 presented by Japan, as well as Working Papers 55 and 172. In addition, although it had been mentioned earlier under Agenda Item 1.1, we would like to reiterate our concern with replacing technology roadmap with air navigation roadmaps, as discussed in Working Paper 26. Technology roadmaps produce essential information regarding availability of technology, especially the avionics roadmaps, which is fundamental for implementation. IATA therefore would propose that improvement to the existing roadmaps be developed for Edition 6 of the GANP. We would be glad to cooperate in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, IATA. ICCAIA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. ICCAIA supports the role of ICAO to deliver performance-based requirements as a means to drive the development and regional deployment of GANP elements. In line with recommendations for Working Paper 55, we would like to reinforce the importance that ICAO continue the efforts to recognize and use industry standards as suitable means of compliance. Lastly, it is crucial to integrate in the ASBU planning that the definition of the performance requirements shall be anticipated as much as possible, as it is the basic input required to develop all operational, technical, and regulatory provisions supporting an ASBU element. Thank you.
Thank you very much. United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The U.S. also supports Working Papers 26, 103, and 55. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan.
Thank you, Chairman. Japan would like to also support Working Paper 55 regarding SRTM, Standardization Relation Framework. Especially so, validation activity it is essential for development technical standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil.
Buenos días.
Good morning. First of all, we would like to commend the quality of the various papers submitted. We also support WP26 as well as Japan's WP103 and also support what Singapore and Norway have said about performance indicators. It's a very important issue. We also support WP55 and WP172. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. We have Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sierra Leone fully supports the Working Paper 26 as presented, 103 as presented, and 55 and 172. We only wish to add that in the development of air navigation system, ICAO should pay more attention to developing countries in respect of their capacity to cope up with the rest of the global world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Sierra Leone. We have Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Saudi Arabia support Secretary to Working Paper 26 on the development of new approach for the definition of roadmap of GANP. We have a slight suggestion amendment to the recommendation, mainly paragraph A, to add the following statement: the roadmap should also provide information on operational performance and capability linked to ASBU modules. Saudi Arabia also support Working Paper 55 and 172. Thank you.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. Indonesia.
Thank you, Chairman. We welcome to the proposed recommendation by the Secretariat in the WP 26, and we also underline the request to provide air navigation roadmap in GAN to support the new airspace user, such as the use of small unmanned aircraft to piloted urban taxi, and also the emerging technology such as cloud computing, virtualization, and artificial intelligence, as well as functionality agile radio system. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Indonesia. Is there anyone else wishing to comment? Okay, I see none. Can you just give us a few minutes to summarize the notes on this discussion? Okay, thank you. So I will now try to summarize the discussion of on sub-item 1.3. There was a proposal to amend the recommendation presented in Working Paper 26 so that number 2, A2, would now read greater flexibility where possible in the choice of technologies, and deleting for airspace users. And then 3, early adoption of new technologies and operational capabilities as they emerged, linked to the ASBU models. So I hope we captured that correctly. The committee recognized the benefits and agreed with the proposed approach for the development of the roadmaps within the GANP. wide support was provided to the development of performance-based provisions and the need to define acceptable means of compliance through which interoperability and adherence to ICAO provisions can be assessed. The committee encouraged ICAO to continue efforts to place more reliance on industry standards to complement ICAO provisions. In this regard, the committee was informed that ICAO was already working closely with the industry standards making organizations in support of the Assembly Resolution A3922. The committee was also informed that the development of a data link Internet protocols suite standardization roadmap was being progressed by the appropriate ICAO expert groups. The committee urged states to provide ICAO with timely information on states' modernization plans and the equipage of airspace users. That's the equipage plans of airspace users. The committee referred the conduct of the Data Link IPS Seminar Symposium to ICAO. The conclusions are for further consideration. Is there any comment, discussion on this summary? Does it capture the discussion? Okay, thank you. We always have to be careful of saying this, but we are pretty much ahead of time. And as usual, as soon as we say that, then things go off the rails. So two things. One is that given the time before lunch, 15 minutes, opening up discussion 1.4, we would not finish. So I'm proposing that we end early. You have some extra time for lunch. And after lunch, we will begin agenda item 1.4. Additionally, the plan was, as laid out in terms of the discussion of agenda items, is that we would stick to the schedule for each day. This was because the agenda was presented long in advance so that states and international organizations could plan their attendance. Given the fact that we are ahead of time, when we discuss agenda item 1.4, if we do finish early, we would consider starting agenda item 2, but that would be based on you, the committee. So we would poll the room at that time and determine whether you would like to start agenda item 2 this afternoon. Is that okay with everyone? Okay, thank you. So we would adjourn now for lunch, which is, I believe, sponsored by Leonardo. Is it correct? No? Yes. Okay. Thank you.